Welcome to Moral Tribe Games. I'm Rab and I'm going to be taking you through the beginner's guide to the 20 Primarchs. 18, 20. We'll get to that. Now, if you like some of the lore that you hear in this video, go over to blacklibrary.com and have a look at some of their audiobooks, their ebooks, and even their paperbacks and hardbacks. The lore and the stories there are absolutely fantastic. I love them. I want to share as much as I can, get as many people into them as possible. So if you do like what you hear and it might tickle your fancy, then head across to blacklibrary.com and get yourself some copies. Okay, so the Primarchs, the key warriors, the generals in the Horus Heresy and beyond now too. So the Primarchs were the key, the mould to the Emperor's Astartes project. Having fine-tuned the process of the predecessors, the Thunder Warriors, that was the warriors the Emperor used to conquer the planet initially, Terra, and unify all the warring factions. Now these Thunder Warriors, they were savage, they were brutes, but ultimately they were flawed and their lifespan wasn't great. So naturally the Emperor then upped his game and came back even stronger with the Primarch project. The Primarchs were bred to be larger, stronger, faster, and just generally better than any mortal could hope to be. Each of the 20 Primarchs were unique, and the warriors produced from their gene codes enabled the productions of the Space Marine legions we know of today. The Space Marines being the ruthless offspring, in a sense, to the father Primarch of each respective legion. So to keep things simple, the Emperor used Thunder Warriors, these savage brutes that were bigger than a mortal man, to conquer and unify Earth, Terra. But unfortunately their lifespan wasn't great and they were flawed. So the Emperor had his next stage. If he wanted to conquer the galaxy, he needed something bigger and better. That's when he had the Primarch project, and each Primarch then, I would say, gave birth, but their gene code was used to create the Space Marines of their respective legion. Once Terra was conquered, the Emperor was already beset on releasing the replacements, Space Marine warriors who would not succumb to the same flaws of their predecessors. So out with the old and in with the new. And the secret to the success of each of these legions was their gene father, the Primarch of each legion. So if we keep the hierarchy simple, you've got the Emperor, his custodes, they're his own personal guard, they're unique and individual, so we'll get to them on a later video. Then the Primarchs, and then from the Primarchs you then got your Space Marines, and then below the Space Marines you'd have your mortals. Let's just take the Thunder Warriors out of the equation. So that was the kind of hierarchy of soldier at that time. So I'm going to list you the Primarchs now, based on the order of their legion. A lot of the things when you search online sometimes list the Primarchs in order of how they were found. Now, the reason for that is that during the Primarch project, when they were still in their incubation camps, these 20 warriors, there's a big long story about this, but ultimately Chaos infiltrated this laboratory and scattered them across the galaxy, and the Emperor had to go looking for each of his Primarch sons to reunite them with the Legion. In doing so, there isn't a specific order that he found them in, but I'm just going to give you the order of their legions. The first Primarch is Lion L. Johnson. He is the Primarch of the Dark Angels. The second Primarch is unknown, expunged from history, hence the little reference to the 18 to 20, because there's two Primarchs that just vanished from Imperial records. I'm hoping one day they explore that. In the third legion, known as the Emperor's Children, their Primarch was Fulgrim, and he was known for seeking perfection, and his warriors do the same. Now the Primarch of the 4th Legion is Perturabo, and I think he's very, very fascinating because he's the siege expert. He's the one that believes in the war of attrition, and it's very, very important for the Horus Heresy and the key role that he plays within that. Primarch of the 5th Legion is Yakati Gan. I've probably pronounced that wrong. Now he is the Primarch of the White Scars. Then there's Leman Russ of the 6th Legion, also known as the Space Wolves. Primarch of the 7th Legion, Rogel Dorn, also known as the Praetorian. He is the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, the Defenders of Terra. The Primarch of the 8th Legion, Conrad Kurz. There's a tragic tale there, but ultimately his legion instills fear. He's kind of, would I say assassin based? No, he's the Night Haunter. We'll just leave that there. Primarch of the 9th Legion, Sanguinus, so he is the Primarch of the Blood Angels. Now, when I first got into Warhammer 40k, the Blood Angels were the poster boys, if you like. They're the ones that are always dressed in red. The 10th Legion has Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, and Ferrus Manus himself had Iron Hands. There's a bit more to it than that, but I'll just lightly touch on that. The 11th Legion was another one of the unknowns, expunged from Imperial records, so we don't really know what the crack is there. 12th Legion, Angron, known as the World Eaters. And now Angron is the epitome of the angry man, if you like. Just imagine a giant red Hulk. That's Angron. He goes down a very, very dark path, as you can imagine. Quite a tragic tale as well. He's quite loyal to his own men in a lot of ways. So Primarch of the 13th Legion, Rubaut Guilliman. He is in charge of the Ultramarines. Primarch of the 14th Legion, Mortarion. He is Primarch of the Death Guard, as his name Mortarion may suggest. 15th Legion, Magnus the Red. He is in charge of the Thousand Suns. He's the sorcerer. He's also known as the Cyclops because he has one eye. Primarch of the 16th Legion, Horus Lupercal. Now his legion was originally called the Luna Wolves, and then when Horus was made War Master, he renamed them the Sons of Horus. His hubris is radiating. Primarch of the 17th Legion is Lorgar. He's Primarch of the Wordbearers, arguably the architect of the heresy. My favourite, the Primarch of the 18th Legion, Vulcan. He's in charge of the Salamanders, and Vulcan's just awesome. Primarch of the 19th Legion is Corvus Corax, and he's in charge of the Raven Guard. And Primarchs, plural, of the 20th Legion is Alpharius and Omegon. Now, I'm not even sure how much their own brothers know about this pair, but they're twins. And it's questionable whether they're loyal or traitor, but ultimately they're in charge of the Alpha Legion, and they're known for their espionage. Now, like all brothers, there's going to be fallout from time to time, but some of them were already at loggerheads before the proverbial hit the fan. However, the actions taken by Horus created a solid divide between the brothers. Horus initially turned Fulgrim and Angron to his side, quite openly turning traitor against the Imperium. So the Imperium was absolutely outraged and sent a whole bunch of fleets to deal with it. Then there was the tragedy, the betrayal at Isstvan V, and that's when Mortarion, Conrad Kurz, Alpharius, Lorgar, later Magnus and Perturabo all then turned traitor on the black sands of Isstvan V. It was an absolute betrayal, a massacre. It was sick. Nice to read. I'm going to go back and read that actually. With brother pitted against brother, the war for the galaxy got a bit out of hand. The traitorous Primarchs lending themselves to the Chaos Gods in return for dark powers to make them stronger on their crusade towards Terra. The loyalist Primarchs were always on the back foot. The War Master was tapping into powers that even he wasn't sure he could control. He was using things like warp rifts and clouds and using all these dark magic to his benefit for communication, travel, even his weapons were upgraded. Horus's closest allies noticed massive changes in him. Now, whilst all the Primarchs have really interesting characteristics, I'm going to cherry pick a few which are key to the Horus Heresy setting. So first of all, we're going to look at Rogel So he's the Primarch of the Imperial Fists. Now, why is he key to it all? Because his role is to garrison Terra. He's got to protect Earth for the inevitable invasion. So his key strength, and always has and always will, lie in fortifications. So he completely remodels the Imperial Palace to make it this bastion of defence. He spends 10 years doing it because the heresy does span over a decade between the Isstvan V massacre, which you could argue is when they declared their traitorous ways, all the way to the Siege of Terra is a 10-year span. So Rogel key role is to garrison the homeworld and make sure it's impenetrable to the traitorous forces. Now, for every yin there is a yang, so of course there's Perturabo. Now, he's the Primarch of the 4th Legion and he's the siege expert. So when it comes to the Siege of Terra, it's basically Perturabo versus Rogel. Now, Perturabo lays claim that there is no fortress he cannot siege, that he cannot crumble, that he cannot break into. And of course Rogel will argue that there's no place that he cannot garrison that anyone can get into. So it's the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. So it makes a really interesting play, especially considering the traitorous armies have a lot of dark powers on their side. These dark powers, the loyalist forces aren't completely clued up to just yet. Alpharius and Omegon, that's the twins of the 20th Legion, Alpha Legion. On the surface, they're traitorous. They sided with Horus. But it's really interesting when you read through the Horus Heresy that there's that sort of hint that they might actually be loyal. On many occasions when they're quizzed why they're doing what they're doing, they say, for the Emperor. Even in some of the meetings between the traitor Primarchs, Alpharius signs off with the sign of the Aquila, which is basically a nod to the Emperor. So it's not entirely clear if the Alpha Legion are working for their own ends to, in the long run, help the Emperor, or if they are in fact traitor. And because they're shrouded in mystery, it leaves a nice kind of cliffhanger as to what their part is to play in the whole thing. And it is suggested, they are twins, it's suggested that Alpharius was perhaps loyal, and his twin brother Omegon is the one that leans towards traitor. So between the two of them, they're on the fence, but as things will play out, you'll see exactly why it starts to lean towards Omegon. Now Angron, the Butcher, he's boots on the ground, he wants to be the first one sieging the Imperial Palace. Now Angron's got quite a tragic tale in that the planet that he landed on when the scattering happened, that was when I explained to you the Primarchs were all in their capsules, Chaos got into the laboratory and scattered them across the galaxy. Now the planet that Angron landed on was a slave planet with fighting pits, and the slavers there drilled in what's known as the Butcher's Nails into his skull. Now the Butcher's Nails is a device that basically sends him nuts and makes him angry all the time. Angry, Angron, you can see where they got that one. So Angron just loves to go down the butcherous, barbaric route, and he then starts to lean himself towards Khorne, which is the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, blood for the blood god. Demon Prince Angron, he's going all the way. All he wants to do is shed blood, fight, and cause problems. And then there's Lorgar, the architect of the heresy, to a certain extent. Now, Lorgar was always the seeker of knowledge. He always wanted to know more, he wanted to be enlightened, he wanted to know the truth. Now in the early days he worshipped the Emperor as a god, and he got chastised for it by the Emperor himself. The Emperor said, "Do not worship me, I am not a god," or words to that effect. And Lorgar was a bit miffed by that, because naturally he did believe, and still to this day believes, that the Emperor is a god. And he's got a bit of an argument to make, because there's certainly traits of the Emperor that are godlike. And interestingly enough, Lorgar wrote the Lectitio Divinitas, which is what a whole bunch of very loyal supporters of the Emperor started believing in and reading the books of during the heresy. And this is worshipping the Emperor as a god, which was originally frowned upon. Now, even to this day now, in the 40k universe, they call him the God Emperor. So it's almost like it's become a given that he is a god-like character, the very thing that he didn't want to be worshipped before. And this all stems back to Lorgar. So interestingly enough, Lorgar never wanted to be traitor. He wanted the Emperor to be worshipped, just as he is now. It's just the way things happened when he then had visions and spoke with Ingethro, I think the name is. She was a demon who showed Lorgar visions of the future and variations of that, and Lorgar then understood that if they do not overthrow the Emperor, or attempt to, then basically all of humanity will be wiped out. So there you have it. There's a brief outline, or a beginner's guide, to the key Primarchs in the Horus Heresy story. Now, if you liked what you heard today, please like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. That's much appreciated. Now remember, if it's not hurting anybody, do what makes you happy.